It's been a while, but you still look shabby. Do you want me to lend you one of my girls out of pity? I attended my middle school reunion.
A wealthy former classmate saw me, laughed, and shoved one of the women in his entourage towards me.
Don't treat women like objects. That's disgusting. What? How dare you talk back to me? The taxes I pay and the money I spend benefit your life. You should kneel down and grovel before your superiors. Hearing this, I stepped forward confidently and said, then you should be the one to kneel before me. What?
I grew up in a single-parent household with my older brother and our mom.
Raising two growing boys alone must have been tough.
Our mom was always working, and it must have been incredibly hard for her. Even so, our income was never good. Most of my clothes and belongings were hand-me-downs from my brother. Even when they got holes or the fabric wore thin, we patched them up and made do.
We'd cover up my brother's name with a thick pen. Little efforts like that now bring back fond memories.
There was always a rich classmate who would mock me for this. His name was Stephen. Stephen always had the latest, trendiest items. He was the complete opposite of me, who used old, repaired hand-me-downs. Every day, Stephen would insult me with obvious jabs about being poor.
Hey, there's a hole in your shirt. It's so sad you have to wear such raggedy clothes. Oh, that's right, you don't have a dad at home. Must be tough. Stephen would carry gifts to attract the girls in our class.
These could be sweets from a popular bakery or keychains from the latest anime.
Surrounded by girls enticed by his gifts, Stephen would always say the same line to me. You want one too, don't you? If you beg for it, I might give you one. Aren't you going to ask? Such a childish harassment. Trying to buy people's attention with things was the lowest. My family was poor.
But my mom worked hard to mend our clothes, and my brother would cook meals for us while studying. There was so much love and care, and even if we didn't have trendy items, we were happy. Stephen, who looked down on people like they were livestock for crowding around his things, didn't make me jealous at all.
I always thought Stephen was a shallow person and ignored him. I don't need it. Ha! A poor kid pretending to be tough. How arrogant. Stephen didn't like my response. He started harassing me more persistently, and it escalated. Not just Stephen, but his followers also began mocking me like a toy.
They tripped me on purpose, or used wrestling moves as an excuse to pin me down.
My already worn-out school uniform became even more tattered and full of stitches.
Wearing that increasingly shabby uniform, my mom and brother couldn't help but notice something was wrong. They started worrying about my school life. But if they found out, it would only add more problems to our already heavy burden.
Maybe I wanted to put up a good front with my family.
But more than that, I didn't want to worry them.
Your uniform is getting really worn out lately. Is there something wrong? Yeah, if there's anything, you should tell us. No, nothing's wrong. Sorry for worrying you. I've just been clumsy lately.
Tripping on the stairs and catching my uniform on fences on the way to school.
I'm sorry you have to keep mending it.
I'll be more careful. I used cheap excuses to get by and changed the subject.
But I'm sure they noticed.
My mom, who worked so hard to give me at least new clothes for my birthday, suddenly collapsed at work one day, as if a string had snapped. The doctor at the hospital said she collapsed due to overwork and mild malnutrition. Even just the cost of living and rent is tough, and we can't afford hospital bills while we're still in school.
But we've got to do something.
My brother said this with a serious look on his face, clearly deep in thought. The next day, when I got home from school, my brother had packed up all his belongings from high school.
What? What's with all this stuff, bro? Michael, I'm going to start working.
To cover our mom's hospital bills and our living expenses, my brother chose to drop out of high school and start working. That night, I saw my brother sitting alone, looking sadly at the indoor shoes he'd placed by his bed. He must have had good friends at school and many dreams for his future. He was only 17. He had quit school without even talking to Mr. Brown, the principal, just to make money for our family. At home, he always tried to act strong so I wouldn't worry, but that night was the first and last time he showed any regret about leaving school. I couldn't let him bear all the burden alone. That day, I decided that after I graduated middle school, I would start working. Eventually, our mom was discharged from the hospital and quickly went back to her part-time job. But even with my brother's earnings, we were still poor.
Steven's harassment didn't stop either. But by then, I didn't care about Steven anymore.
Finally, it was graduation day from middle school. I think Steven said something to me as I walked out the school gate, but I ignored everything and walked away, driven by a sense of purpose.
The very next day after graduation, I started job hunting in earnest.
The resume I used was from the pack my brother had bought after he dropped out of high school. When I declared that I wouldn't go to high school and would start working, both my mom and brother were strongly opposed.
"Don't worry about that. I'll earn enough for your school fees,"
my brother said, grabbing my shirt, his face about to cry. Having given up his own high school life, he probably wanted at least his younger brother to go. My mom, too, tried to get angry and say it wasn't acceptable, but halfway through, she couldn't speak anymore. She cried, saying she felt so helpless and pathetic. Their pain was palpable. They wanted me to go to high school and have a fun school life, but we couldn't even afford the enrollment fee.
I was part of this family too.
I didn't want them to bear all the hardships alone.
After many discussions, they finally agreed to let me start job hunting with just a middle school diploma. But as people had warned, not having a high school diploma was a huge handicap. I was repeatedly turned down for interviews, and even when I got one, I was often laughed at and dismissed. Despite many rejections, I never gave up.
One day, while shopping at a nearby supermarket and checking job ads, James, the manager of a Western-style restaurant who had once turned me down for a job, called out to me.
"Hey, are you still trying?"
"Yes. I have to work for my family's sake,"
I replied earnestly.
James gently put his hand on my shoulder and said,
"I can't offer you a great job right away. It would be part-time at first. But if that's okay, would you like to work for me?"
Later, I learned that James had heard about my family situation from other restaurant owners who had also turned me down. The world works in mysterious ways.
I started working part-time as a floor staff at the Western restaurant. My first tasks were serving food, cleaning the floor before opening, and tidying up after closing.
Once I got used to those tasks, I started making simple drinks and handling reservations. I did everything asked of me, including chores that weren't officially part of my job. Though I was constantly tired from learning so many new things, I was determined not to complain. I was finally employed, and I was determined to hold on to this job no matter what. As I grew more accustomed to my job, I became increasingly interested in the cooking that James did. Having learned to cook as a kid to help out my often absent mom, I watched James's preparations with keen interest. The staff and James's efficiency were truly impressive, and I couldn't help but be captivated by it.
Maybe my intense gaze was noticed. One day, James guided me into the kitchen and said, "If you don't mind, could you cook a meal for the staff today?"
Encouraged by James's smile, I nervously made a simple meal for the staff. To my surprise, it was well received, and from that day on, I was assigned the task of making staff meals. James thought it was a waste for only the staff to enjoy my cooking, so he added my dish to the menu. Within days, it became a new dish at the restaurant. Even more surprisingly, this dish became the restaurant's signature menu. It was so popular with customers that the restaurant's sales increased significantly, and I was promoted from floor staff to main chef. The restaurant gained a great reputation through word of mouth, and soon, TV and magazine interviews followed, but I never appeared in the media.
Having been bullied in school, I preferred not to draw attention to myself.
Thanks to James, I continued to improve my skills, serving famous celebrities, food critics, and even international gourmets without ever showing my face publicly. One day, James invited me to his house.
"I have something important to discuss with you." "Don't worry, it's nothing bad. Why invite me to your house?" "I wonder what this is about."
Nervously, I went to his house, and James proposed, "Your talent deserves more recognition.
We're considering to open a second location, and I'd like you to be the manager."
The suddenness of the proposal left me a bit bewildered. However, I decided to gratefully accept James's offer. James had given me a chance when no one else would. Additionally, I was simply happy to be trusted and wanted to meet those expectations. But I preferred to remain behind the scenes as a chef. I loved cooking, but I didn't like being the center of attention. When I discussed this with my brother, he gave me a reassuring response.
Leave it to me.
At that time, my brother was working full-time at a restaurant.
I can handle the customer service. I have kitchen experience too. And I've learned a bit about managing and running a business as a full-time employee.
When I told James about this, he happily agreed.
The grand opening of the second location arrived. This new restaurant was more upscale in appearance and decor compared to the original.
The original location was a local favorite, family-style restaurant, so people unfamiliar with us might not realize the two were related. However, the new restaurant's upscale appearance appealed to wealthy locals and those from neighboring towns, quickly making it a popular spot. Years later, my brother and I, who started working right after middle school, had grown into adults. The first time I had a drink was in the restaurant where my brother used to work. Our mom was now working without overexerting herself, and her health was stable.
One day, a letter arrived for me. Its contents cast a shadow over my heart. It was an invitation to a middle school reunion. Honestly, I didn't have any good memories from middle school, and I was reluctant to face my classmates.
But my brother strongly encouraged me, saying, "Take a break for once," and even bought me a new suit.
So I couldn't refuse and reluctantly decided to go. On the day of the reunion,
my former classmates seemed to have forgotten about me and were enjoying themselves in their own circles. Having no close friends there, I quietly enjoyed the buffet in the corner of the room.
Unexpectedly, the food at the party was impressive.
The presentation was great, and the taste was quite good too.
This presentation is interesting.
Maybe if I tweak it a bit and add it to our menu, it could be even better. I thought as I stopped a floor staff member to ask about the names and ingredients of some dishes.
Suddenly, a group approached me.
Polished leather shoes and tailored suits surrounded by numerous high heels. I looked up to see Stephen and his entourage of women.
Hey, don't bother the staff just because you're lonely. It's pitiful for them to have to talk to someone like you. Stephen sneered, and his entourage laughed at me in agreement.
It's such a shame you don't have anyone to reminisce with at this reunion.
Want me to be your conversation partner?
Stephen, with his flashy, nouveau riche style, was decked out in high-end clothes and jewelry, making me think I looked more refined in comparison. He wore an expensive suit, flaunted a Rolex watch, and had several women hanging around him. His smarmy smile and unpleasant gaze were the same as in middle school, seeing people only as objects. This guy hasn't changed at all since back then. You don't need to bother with me. My glance at Stephen made him visibly uncomfortable. Then, he swiftly moved in front of me.
What's up with you, still wearing those cheap suits? Well, I guess a middle school graduate like you can't make much money. You don't have a girlfriend, do you? Here, I'll give you one of mine. You always liked hand-me-downs.
Go on, have fun with her. With that, he pushed one of the women in his entourage towards me. I made an even more disgusted face.
No thanks.
And don't treat women like objects, I said, glaring at him.
Stephen's mood soured, and he raised his voice. What? How dare you?
Women are just accessories that enhance my charm.
When I get bored, I replace them. I've got so many women flocking to me. I could throw them away.
Hearing this, the women around him started to argue.
What? Stephen, is that what you think? You told me I was the only one. Yeah, you said I was the most important. Stephen sighed and began to look down on everyone around him.
You all are no better than him. Wearing cheap clothes and eating cheap food makes your heart just as shallow.
I eat at top-tier restaurants. So this kind of low-quality food doesn't suit my taste.
I finally snapped and grabbed Stephen by the collar, raising my voice.
Don't insult food made with a chef's soul. You're just a spoiled brat showing off your parents' money. Stephen's face turned red as he yelled back. Shut up. How dare a low-class person insult me? The taxes I pay and the money I spend benefit your life. People like me should be respected. You should apologize and kneel on the floor. I sighed internally. This guy is still so childish. Enough of this. Well, you should be the one to kneel before me. What? Are you deaf? I told you to kneel down. Pork cutlet with onion and sauerkraut dip. What? And beer instead of wine, with French sourdough bread, right? This was his favorite dish.
Stephen was a regular at my restaurant, so I remembered everything.
You should be the one to kneel before me. To you, I'm someone who should be respected.
I said this calmly, but Stephen looked confused.
What are you talking about? I'm the one who cooks the meals at the restaurant you always go to. I'm the one who makes your food, so in a way, I control what you eat. As someone who satisfies your high-class tastes, I'm actually in a higher position than you, right? No way.
As a valued customer, treating people like objects isn't suitable for my restaurant.
Please, don't come to our restaurant again,
I said, maintaining the decorum of a chef while suppressing my anger. Stephen stood there, stunned.
Are you really? He muttered. I responded calmly, without changing my expression. I've always been good at cooking.
Since I was a kid, I cooked for my family because my mom was always working. Pushing Stephen aside, the women from his entourage now approached me.
Wait, you're the young genius chef from that famous restaurant?
I heard the main chef was really young, but I never thought it was you, a classmate.
Oh, that's right, your ears do look like the ones in that Wednesday article. I've been curious because you never showed your face. Suddenly, the reunion revolved around me. I'm embarrassed. Is that really what people are saying?
I'm not photogenic and prefer to stay out of the spotlight, I said.
Feeling awkward as I was surrounded by everyone.
I was taken aback, but I found myself surrounded by all the attendees.
While I was bombarded with questions, Stephen was completely ignored. Hey, everyone, listen to me for a second. Stephen tried to interject with a trembling voice. The women who were once his entourage changed their attitudes. What? We're just low-class people, right? Why don't you go hang out with your high-class friends?
Stephen, now desperate, flashed his black card to try and win them back.
Come on.
I'll do anything, just ignore that guy.
I have a black card. I'm sorry for earlier.
I'll buy you whatever you want, just forgive me. At that moment, the room fell silent.
Then just leave the black card here and go. We're tired of you looking down on us. Are you still trying to bribe us with stuff? Pathetic. Anything you buy loses value anyway. Stephen no longer had a place there.
As Stephen continued to make pathetic excuses, someone shouted, "You're an eyesore. Get out now," and he was thrown out of the venue. A few days later, Stephen came to my restaurant. However, it took some time for both me and the floor staff to recognize Stephen, who used to be a regular. Stephen, who was always so confident and assertive. But today, he was hunched over, looking down, and quietly mumbling his order.
He sat alone, silently eating and crying. Hey, can you get the chef for me?
Even the floor staff, familiar with his usual behavior, noticed Stephen's unusual demeanor. Called by the staff, I approached Stephen, who looked at me awkwardly.
So it really was your restaurant. Stephen, what happened to you?
I was shocked at the drastic change in him. With a bitter smile, he began to speak.
All I have left is this food. It's really good. The only thing that can fill my heart now is your cooking. It's good because it's made with skill, not a degree.
Even a poor guy can rise up if he has talent, I said lightly, trying to ease the tension, but Stephen sighed.
You're amazing. You can captivate people with your skills alone. I could only hold on to people with money and things. After that reunion, everything I bought for them was sent back. My dad found out about my spending and was furious. He told me I can't buy people's hearts and kicked me out. He took my card, so now I'm broke. He then slowly revealed his true feelings. It seemed he also had his own struggles. Born into a prestigious family, he faced immense pressure, strict education, and a demanding schedule. His parents were never satisfied, always expecting perfection. School was his playground, and money was the only thing he could flaunt. He bought friends and his place in society. Money was his outlet for stress, and it was the only thing that made him feel free. But he also felt an emptiness that could never be filled. Seeing me live freely despite being poor made him envious. Out of jealousy and as a way to relieve his stress, he repeatedly harassed me. Stephen apologized to me multiple times. Ha! If you like me so much, you should have just said so. I would have been your friend. Well, it's not too late. Unable to be straightforward, I spoke with a bit of a pout. Even so, I wanted to extend a helping hand. If you're struggling after being disowned, how about I hire you? You have a good face, so you can attract customers. It won't be a great job at first, just part-time, but what do you say? You idiot, don't say stuff like that to a crying man. Thank you. Stephen, with a tear-streaked face, nodded. So, you're joining the ranks of us low-class people, huh? Come on, stop crying. I teased him as I decided to hire him. A few months passed. Stephen proved to be very capable, apparently a sergeant from a wealthy family. His manners and behavior were quite admirable. His knowledge of food was impressive, too. Having eaten good quality ingredients, he had a refined palate. Now, he even helps me develop new menu items. Hey, poor guy, this dish is a bit too salty. I'm a former poor guy, got it? Current poor guy. But you're right about the taste. Thanks to Stephen, we also got more female customers. He always had good looks, but his bad attitude used to overshadow them. Now, with his harsh attitude softened, his impression had improved significantly. See? Look at that. We've got a ton of female customers here for me again today. Telling me proudly, Stephen made me a little annoyed, so I retorted. Ha! It's because I'm good at what I do. We bickered like this every day, and my brother would often watch us with a slightly exasperated smile, saying, "You two are really childish." Our mom also visited the restaurant when she had time, watching us with a fond smile. "Seeing you so happy makes me want to live a long life," she said. Stephen and I might have always wanted to have this kind of banter. Being able to do now what we couldn't in our past circumstances made me feel genuinely happy.